That when Jesus came to earth, He came to die for all our sins.
Porque todos, por naturaleza, sabemos que existe un Dios.
All that stuff in the Bible is really cool, but I wish I could somehow be there. I wish I could be in the Bible. I wish that there was a time that I could have been there. I got good news for you. In Revelation chapter 7, you're in the Bible. You made it. If they took a video, you would be in it. Here's what it says in Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 10. After all these things, I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne. And behold, the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. Who was there? All nations, all tribes, all languages, praising God. God's plan worked. He reached the world. And we were there. We will be there too. We'll be some of the people that are there. It says that you couldn't number them. There were so many, so the camera might not be able to catch us, but we're there, right? God's plan ultimately works, and His plan has stayed the same from the beginning. Start small. Start where you're at. And use what you have to reach the world. God will do the rest. God will do the rest. And so that brings us back to where we began, which was Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. Let me just read it quickly for you, because it's important. Sometimes it's easy to skip over a phrase and not realize how much is in it. Jesus said in verse 13, you are the salt of the earth. Now, salt, he used salt because several reasons why he might use salt. Salt, it's the preservative. Back in the day, it's the preservative. It's also something that brings out the flavor. And so Jesus is saying, look, if the world is going to know God, if you're going to be the salt of the earth, you have to walk with God. Then they can see Christ in you. And so just by doing nothing, by saying nothing, but just mixing, they're going to say, wait a minute, there's something different about that person. This isn't the way we humans normally behave. This person is forgiving. This person is loving. This person's got something different about them. You are the salt of the earth. But the only way that that's going to change the world is if the salt gets out of the salt shaker. Right? Can't stay in the salt shaker. It doesn't do much good if it's in the salt shaker. You're the salt of the earth. And he says, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. If the salt is just left setting somewhere, if the salt is diluted, if the salt forgets, pretending the salt has a mind of its own, what it's here for, then it's like a builder that builds his house on the sand, right? If you forget that God is in me, Christ in me, the hope of glory, how can you expect God to use you in the world? He goes on to say, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Not only are we salt, but we're light. You know, there are some times when I desperately need light. If I'm driving down the road, as Miguel will attest to in the evening, sometimes I have difficulty seeing. I don't know if any of you all have developed this thing, or maybe it's just me, but I don't know. As the years go on, I seem to not see it well that well at night. I need light. I need extra light, right? Light tells you where you're going. We don't take a light and hide it. We don't take salt and set it apart from food. Jesus says, look, the only way that God's plan is going to be accomplished, He has one plan to reach the earth. The only way it's going to be accomplished if we do works, if we live with Christ in us, and also if we use our mouth to shine a light on the gospel, right? To show the light of the world, Jesus. We're the light because Christ is in us. And so we not only have to live, but we have to speak. We don't want to get to the book, the end of the chapter and find out we built our house on sand, on things that didn't last. We had an elaborate mansion, but it was wasted because we didn't invest in God's plan. which was this: I want my image, I want my glory to go around the world. And it starts with you. It starts here, it starts small, it starts now. But will God accomplish His plan? Will God accomplish His plan? Yes, He will accomplish His plan. I'm going to tell you one more story as we wrap up here. Being from Nebraska, has anybody ever lived in Nebraska? Okay, then you guys know what I'm talking about. In Nebraska, you have severe weather of all kinds, and you never know when it's going to happen. But you know pretty much this: when it gets to be wintertime, you're going to see snow about November, and you're not going to see the ground again until about April, right? Am I right? And you're used to sliding around streets. You know, that's just part of driving there. And you pay little kids good money to shovel the walks, because you can't shovel the walks. It's just solid ice. And so they have this thing in Nebraska that they do. They take this thing called bags of salt, and they just dump it on the streets. They dump it on the sidewalks. And you know what that does? It's supposed to melt the ice. It's supposed to melt the ice. But a lot of times it's just sitting there doing nothing. Salt is good because it's supposed to melt the ice. And especially in Lincoln, where I grew up, you want the streets to be clean because you want a clear path to go to Nebraska football stadium. Right? Everybody wants that to be cleared off, and you got this ice all over. But after a while, sometimes, even though it's been sitting there doing nothing, sometimes the sun comes out, and the light of the sun shines on the ice, on the brick, on the concrete ice, right? And all of a sudden, the salt starts to work. And so the salt and the sun, the salt and the light come together, and all of a sudden the path is clear. Everybody can get on roads, thousands of people can go to Nebraska Stadium to watch the Huskers play on another Saturday. And they're usually playing well into December. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be salt and we need to be light. If we're just salt, if we just live, people will notice a difference. But if we live it and we speak it and we show it, we're going to melt away so that people can see our God's great plan, that He starts with us. He starts small, but He goes big. Let's close in prayer.
To present us faultless before the presence of His glory, with exceeding joy, to the only wise God,
el único Dios sabio,
our Savior,
nuestro Salvador,
be glory, majesty, dominion, and power. And to present us faultless before the presence of His glory, with exceeding joy,
con un gozo grande,
to the only wise God,
el único Dios sabio,
our Savior,
nuestro Salvador,
be glory, majesty, dominion, and power.